Hello and what's up, political peeps? Per usual, I am your host, Arav Kapoor, and today I am joined by a super special guest, the chair of the Fairfield Democratic Town Committee, Mr. Steve Sheinberg. Mr. Sheinberg, welcome to the GeoPolitical.
Thank you, Arav. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
So I'm so glad to talk about kind of your career, how you got into public service, what the Democratic Party in Fairfield means to you, and much more. So first, tell us, how did you get involved with the Fairfield DTC?
Okay, as far as the Fairfield DTC, I moved here from Weston 12 years ago.
Okay.
And this was then afterwards the Malloy campaign in 2014,
Yeah.
running for re-election. And I've been a political operative for a long time. They called me and they wanted me to run the Malloy campaign in Fairfield and the area. And so that's what I did in 14. I've been a lifelong operative. I got my start in politics in college, taking a poli-sci course called campaign politics, where I interned in a presidential campaign and loved it, and been running and organizing campaigns since then.
Can I ask what presidential campaign you went
Yes, it was
in?
1976, and Mo Udall was a congressman from Arizona, and I worked for him. He lost the nomination to Jimmy Carter, so then I worked as an intern for Jimmy Carter.
That's really cool. Can you tell me how tell us, I guess, your time with him and then Jimmy Carter ultimately shaped kind of your time and how you act as a Democrat now in
Right.
the town committee?
Thank you. So, what it taught me is how to work with people. So, working on the presidential campaign in New York, a deep blue state,
Yeah.
was just basically getting out the vote, GOTV, for the presidential election. And what I learned is how to organize, how to work with people, how to get out the vote. And these were days before computers. And so I was inspired working in a campaign because I wanted to have an impact in government. And I thought the best way to have an impact is to work in a campaign. And when you elect a candidate that you like, they will make the change that you want to see. So I stuck with campaign politics since 1976.
And given your vast experience with campaign politics, what specifically led you to Fairfield's Democratic Town Committee?
Well, I moved here and I've been involved as an operative. And so getting involved with the town committee was like what I did in 1976, where in New York there are political clubs, which
Yes.
is like a town committee, and got involved then and was president of the club in Queens, New York. And same thing here, got involved, ran the campaign. And 2 years later, I ran for chair of the Democratic Town Committee in Fairfield. And now I'm serving in my 10th year as chair of the Fairfield DTC.
That is really incredible. But the thing is, a lot of people who I've talked to, that I've told them I'm interviewing you, they don't even know what a chair of a town committee in a town like Fairfield does. So tell me a little bit more. What is your role as a chairperson
Thank
of the Fairfield Democratic Town Committee?
Right. Well, the chair is the leader of the Democratic Party in the town. So, may I describe how the hierarchy or structure of the Democratic Party works in towns in Connecticut and specifically here in Fairfield? So, there are roughly 14,500 Democrats registered to vote in Fairfield. So, any registered Democrat can be joined as a member of the town committee. We have 170 members of the Democratic Town Committee, and every 2 years there's an election for leadership. So it's election for chair, vice chair, treasurer, and recording secretary. The chair appoints a corresponding secretary. So those five individuals comprise the executive board of the Fairfield DTC. And then in each district, 170 members caucus by district and elect a district leader in each of the 10 districts. So the leadership is the 5 people on the executive committee, 10 district leaders. We also have committees, subcommittees in the town committee. So we have a field committee, which is for the campaign, getting out the vote, knocking on doors, texting, phone calls. We have a data committee,
Yeah.
and the data committee looks through the software to decide who the targets are. We don't knock every door, we knock our targets. We have a communications committee, which comprises of the website, emails, and website, emails, and social media. And we have a rapid response team as part of the communications committee. We, of course, have a fundraising committee to raise the funds to run a campaign, have an office, print materials, war cards, and we have an events committee. So we have 2 fundraisers a year, in the spring and the fall. And so the chair is the leader, manages the 170 members, tries to inspire people to work. We try to match skills and the needs. So if someone is good at communications, they would be on that committee. If they're not so good and not interested in communications, but they want to contact voters, they would be in the field campaign.
That's really cool. And to be one of those 170 members, what does that take?
Well, it takes a nomination by someone on the committee. So we have vacancies. We like to have room on the membership rolls for new people to come in. So in January, we nominated 10 people that got involved in the campaign last November. And someone nominates the member, the prospective member, someone seconds the nomination, and then it goes to a vote. And usually there's no competition, and it's a unanimous vote. And so the membership decides who the new members are going to be and votes for that person.
That's really cool. But as the chair of the Democratic Party in Fairfield, can you tell me about some of the challenges that you faced in, like you mentioned, almost 10 years of service on the committee?
Challenges, the number one challenge is to find and identify who is the strongest candidate for the spot. So for this year, we roughly have about 60 candidates that are going to be on the slate of the Democratic Party on the ballot. So that's a challenge to find and inspire someone to want to run for office. It always is hard to get someone that's been an advocate, an organizer, to then run as a candidate. And it's especially tough for the last 10 years with the environment we have nationally. So that's a challenge. And then the challenge is also dealing with the opposition party and trying to rebut and correct them if they spread misinformation or they're saying certain things that we have to rebut. So those are 2 of the challenges. And then, of course, the challenge is to work with each person. Everyone's different, has a different skill. And the challenge is to treat people as an individual and not the same for everybody.
It's truly important. Now, you mentioned it kind of at the end of your response, nominating candidates to run for seats in the state house, for example, or the state senate. For example, Representative Leeper, who also joined my show before the election. What is the process for the Democratic Town Committee to work to nominate people like Representative Leeper and the other state Congress delegation
Sure.
from Fairfield?
So each year is different. So last year was the state house race, the state senate race, probate judge. This year are municipal offices. So there are endorsement meetings or conventions. So State Representative Jen Leeper is a single town house district. So that comes for a vote by every member of the town committee. And she was nominated, second the nomination. There were no other nominations. And she became the nominee of the Democratic Party to give access to the ballot. Now, the 2 other state representatives, Sarah Kitt and Krista McCarthy-Vahey, have 2 towns in their district. So that means that we select delegates to a convention, and those delegates vote same way. Someone nominates, someone seconds the nomination, and that's the way that works. Same thing for state senate. There are 4 towns in the Senate District 28, and each town, based upon how many registered Democrats they have, has delegates. So we have roughly 40 delegates. The other towns had less because we're bigger than Newtown, Bethel, and Easton. And at that convention, the selected delegates nominate the candidate of their choice. Same thing with Jim Himes for
Yeah.
U.S. House. Each of the towns in the 4th Congressional District appoints delegates, and the delegates are approved by the members, and they go to a convention, say in Norwalk, and that's where Jim Himes was nominated for re-election. Statewide, delegates are selected to state conventions for governor, the state constitutional officers,
Yeah.
and last year for Senator Chris Murphy, the delegates vote. Sometimes there's competition. Most of the time there's not. There is no competition, and whoever has the most delegates becomes the nominee of the Democratic Party.
But why don't they run a primary? Like in a lot of the Republican counterparts of these seats that we're talking about, there's a primary election where the public gets to go vote. Why is that something that doesn't seems to happen less often within the Democratic Party?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. It is, I think, because whoever wins at the convention is on row A in a primary, and the person that's not on row A is on row B. And only one time has a candidate in the Democratic Party been the winner of the primary because they're on the second line, second row, row B. So that's one factor. The other factor is that there's a consolidation around the nominee, and everyone wants to move to the general election. So generally, people are discouraged from going into a primary. At a state convention, if you get 15% of the delegates, you're automatically in a primary. If you don't get and you want a primary, then you need to get signatures on a petition to qualify for a primary.
Okay, and that isn't something that commonly happens.
Yeah, it's a rare thing on the statewide. It happened years ago, 15 years ago or so, when Susan Bicewicz primaried Chris Murphy and lost the primary, and I believe that's the case. And so if the convention approves of a candidate by 50% plus one, and you primary and you lose, you've caused some problems in the party, diverting from the general election, and you're not going to be as popular down the road because you did that. But the Democratic Party here in Fairfield and statewide is a small d Democratic Party, which means everyone has an opportunity to run. And if they want to go to a primary, they have to think about it. And if they do it, that's democracy.
And now on the topic of elections, I want to transition and talk about during your time as the chair of the Fairfield DTC, Democrat Party has taken control of all 3 House seats for Connecticut. Can you tell me more about that process and what challenges you faced going against your, Republican opposition in gaining those 3 seats for the Democrat Party?
Well, first, to clarify, within the Democratic Town Committee, there is competition. And then the nominee is selected by the members. So there's the public primary. That's unusual. Does not happen, but internally there is. So Krista McCarthy-Vahey has been serving as a state representative, I believe, since 2014. She entered in 2015. She is in the 133rd district, and she was the best candidate. And Jen Leeper had competition in 2020. It was a special election because Brenda Kupchak in 2019, the state rep at the time, was elected first select woman. And so it was a vacant seat, the special election. There was competition internally, and Jen Leeper had the most support by the members of the Democratic Town Committee, and she became the candidate. In 2022, we searched for a candidate for the 134th House seat. That's Fairfield up in Greenfield Hill, Lake Hills, and part of Trumbull. And my job to win elections is to recruit the best possible candidate that is smart, that's kind, that's skilled, that gives us the best chance to win. And the reason we won those 3 House seats is because of the quality of the candidates and the campaign and the organization that we have, where we have volunteers going out to knock doors, to make phone calls, to text message, and to tell the voters what our message is, what the biography and the plans of the candidate are. So in the end, the way to win an election is to have the strongest possible candidate that's going to work hard and work smart.
Yeah. And despite the Democrat Party having the three seats in the House, the 28th state Senate district seat has been controlled by the Republican Party for a very long time. Can you tell me more about your struggle with that? I know Mr. Blanchard joined the show right before the election. We talked about how this race would be super close, and it was a very close race, similar to how it's been in past years. Tell me more about the struggle for that 28th seat.
Yes. Well, the 28th Senate District was gerrymandered many years ago to help John McKinney, who was the state senator. So you have Fairfield, Easton, about 2/3 of the southern half of Bethel, and Newtown. So it goes straight up the map. And we don't think that Newtown is like Fairfield, Easton, and we shouldn't be in that district, but it was gerrymandered by the senators. Now, also, that's the current district. Every 10 years, there's a census, and then district lines are changed. We used to have Greenfield Farms in Westport,
Mhm.
Greens Farms in Westport, and 2/3 or half of Weston. So interestingly, if we kept that old district before it was gerrymandered out, the piece of Westport and Weston, we would have won the seat because there are more Democrats in Weston and Westport than there are in Bethel. So first thing is the challenge of dealing with the district lines being changed every 10 years against the Democrats. Newtown is more of a Republican leaning town. Secondly, the challenge was that Tony Wong has been involved in as a state House representative, as a state senator for about 16 years. He's a brand name. And Rob Blanchard, while his wife grew up here, he's new here. So that was a challenge against a good retail politician in the Republican senator. Also, I had watched the ballots being put into the tabulator on election night, the early voting ballots, and I saw what we call defection. So many ballots had everyone voting everyone on row A, but then when it came to state Senate, they voted for the Republican on row B. I believe it is because the check and balance of they're voting for all Democrats, but they want a Republican to have a check and balance to represent them in Hartford. So those are the factors why it was a big challenge for Rob. We hope he comes back and runs again. He's on the RTM, and he'll have better name recognition and accomplishments on the RTM to make it a more competitive race. I'll also say that the top of the ticket here in Connecticut and blue states was weaker than anticipated. So the way the president won the popular vote is because in Connecticut, Joe Biden in 2020 won the state by 20 points, but Kamala Harris only won the state by 13 points. And that happened in New York, in California, Illinois, in cities. And that's how the president won not just the Electoral College, but the popular vote.
And when will the 28th district, like you mentioned, the gerrymandering, when does the census happen again?
Yeah, that'll be after 2030. So it's every 10
Okay.
years the census.
And what is, as the Fairfield DTC, what is your ability to influence the residents of Newtown and go campaign and canvass there? Can you do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, we work closely with the chair of those towns and in a coordinated campaign. So we help each other, and we send some volunteers up to Newtown, some interns. The candidate goes up there, and we also run a coordinated campaign, which means, say, Jen Leeper's district, which is my district. She and Rob Blanchard coordinate their volunteers, their targeting on the doors. And so we have what we call turfs, which is you draw a map based upon who you're targeting. And we have one map for both candidates. They help each other. And that's the way we do it in Newtown and in Easton.
And given the influence of Newtown and Easton and these other towns that may lean more Republican than Fairfield, giving Senator Wong the advantage, can you tell us how do you think he originally won as a state representative within Fairfield's district? Start his career in state
Yeah.
politics.
Well, first he was the House.
Mhm.
He ran as a state House candidate in the
Mhm.
134th district. So when he ran for state
Yeah.
Senate, he had good name recognition. People have seen him around. As I said, he's a good retail
Yeah.
politician. And so when he ran for state Senate in an open seat, he did better than the Democratic candidate and won that seat. And in state races, state House, state Senate races, it's very hard to beat an incumbent. So once he won, he was reelected several times.
Yeah. And this also tells about how Fairfield's changed. Like I asked before, the Senator Wong originally won, like you said, the 134th district, which was in Fairfield. And what do you think? How do you think Fairfield's demographic has changed in terms of political parties since the time when Senator Wong was able to win the 134th seat to
Yes.
now when we have the full Democrat control in the state
So
house?
yes, and that's a factor. Our
Mhm.
strong organization and leadership, and it's not only me as chair, but it's the vice chair and the committee chairs.
Mhm.
So in uh, 12 years ago, the registration of Democrats and
Mhm.
Republicans was even at about 10 or 11,000. We are now almost 5,000 more Democrats than Republicans
Mhm.
in Fairfield. And that's because of the work that we've done, providing leadership and common sense
Mhm.
policies and messaging, and a number of other factors have led people to leave the Republican Party and either join the Democratic Party or go unaffiliated. People call themselves independent, but we call them unaffiliated because they're not affiliated or registered with either the Democrats or the Republicans. So there are a number of factors to give us a demographic advantage on
Mhm.
party registration.
Understood. Now I'm going to transition for this as we kind of wrap up our conversation together. Given in in a much broader sense, the Democrat Party's control from all the constitutional officers in the state to their control of the state Senate as well as the state House of Representatives, that's a Democratic trifecta. How do you think this affects the state of democracy in Connecticut and like how bipartisan we are as a state?
Well, yes. So in the state house, there's a supermajority,
Mhm.
state senate, a majority. So it's up to the leaders
Yeah.
of the House, Democratic leaders, and the Senate to collaborate with Republicans to try to forge a compromise
Mhm.
and to be inclusive with
Mhm.
the opposition. So if you do that and you collaborate and have common sense policies, you will get support across the aisle from Republicans. And it's just that we have over time provided the citizens of Connecticut with better candidates that are skilled, that are smart, that are kind, compassionate
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
And so that's how we've won. And that's how the governor, which Governor Lamont has the highest approval rating or one of the highest approval ratings of any governor in the country. He may
Yes.
decide to run for reelection, and he was the stronger candidate. When you nominate a strong candidate at the top of the ticket, it helps down the ballot.
Definitely. To further emphasize that point, when I spoke to Republican Senator Wong, who we've been talking about during this episode, he said, "quote that Connecticut's Senate operates as a bipartisan and even keel organization, kind of letting all parties chime in." So, my last question for you, before we wrap up, I'm gonna zoom way out. What do you think, given the Republican trifecta in the entirety of the United States, contrasting Connecticut's Democratic trifecta? What do you think the state of the Democratic Party is as a whole across the United States at the moment?
Well, as you mentioned, the Congress, both houses,
Mhm.
and the White House is controlled by the Republican Party. The state is needing a better messaging to the public, and because Biden had several very good accomplishments, but the people didn't feel it.
Mhm.
So one thing, to be honest, and that is President Biden was supposed to be a bridge to the new generation, and was supposed to be and hinted that he was going to be a one-term president,
Yeah.
and that hurt because he ran. He shouldn't have run, uh,
Hmm.
and would have allowed a primary and a stronger candidate. Maybe it would have been Kamala Harris, maybe someone else, and she would have been a stronger candidate. So I
Hmm.
have to be honest that he had, and he said it himself, he focused too much on
Yeah.
policy and
Hmm.
not enough on messaging.
Yeah.
Of course, the border and inflation hurt the Democrats. So it's time to be a party of the people, of the middle class, the
Hmm.
working class. Democrats were perceived as coastal elites, which hurt. And that's not true, because with many policies and bills that were passed by the Congress, signed by the president, it helped people. Child poverty was cut almost in half with with actions at the beginning of his administration. So it's the number one goal of the Democratic Party to recruit candidates for next year's election to the U.S. House.
Hmm.
So out of 435 seats, many of them because of gerrymandering, are safe Republican or safe
Yeah.
Democratic seats. But if there are 40 seats that are
Hmm.
up for grabs, the Democrats have to run the strongest possible candidate, and that will be next year in the midterm.
Yeah.
U.S. Senate is very hard to take back because most of the seats are up or in safe red states, so it will be difficult. So we need also to have a new national chair of the Democratic Party, and we need a minority leader Hakeem Jeffries
Yes.
and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to
Hmm.
get together and have a better messaging plan and team to tell the people what's going on. The new president is overreached in 2 days, and that will give major opportunities to the Democrats to
Hmm.
take back the House next year and take back the White House in 28.
Definitely. And I think ultimately, Leader Jeffries and Leader Schumer have to work together more, and like you said, have to spread the message to the public. If, like you said, a House come back in next year, or a possible senatorial come back next year or the year after, when we have those 32 seats up. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up today's episode?
Um, well, we in a democracy, it's the people,
Yeah,
and we want a government of the people,
of
by
course.
the people, and for the people. And right now, we live in a time where the people need to get engaged,
Yeah.
and it's time to get over losing the White House, and to be active, to be a check and balance on a Republican-led government, and to make sure that the Constitution and the rule of law is being followed by Republicans. And I hope that the U.S. Senate Republicans will be that check and balance and not just be a rubber stamp on the new president. So, very important for people to stay engaged. For local people, it is good for you to get involved in local politics where you could have an impact, and you will feel good about yourself making an impact and help us keep our democracy strong and the Constitution and the rule of law. So, for people listening that are local, you can follow the Democratic Party in Fairfield on Facebook, Fairfield Democrats. You can go to our website. You can come to a meeting and meet people. We're like a family. We're a very strong and united Democratic Party here. And we're going to provide the best candidates in the local elections in November. And with the support of the people, we hope to keep the majorities on the Board of Finance, on the Board of Ed, and take the majority on another board, and keep the super majority on the RTM. And so, lastly, Arav, I want to thank you for inviting me on my show.
Thank you so much.
Uh, you're outstanding, and you have a very bright future. And thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I learned so much for you about the process of selecting candidates, your thoughts on the Democrat Party as a whole, and how the Democrat Party will change in Fairfield and beyond over the next 10 years and beyond. So thank you so much, Mr. Sheinberg, for joining me today. Had a great time and look forward to working with you again in the future. Political peeps, you guys know the drill. Peace out, dudes.